So what is this default constructor? For example, when you don't give any arguments, this without arguments, if you create a constructor, this will call it as a default constructor or parameterless constructor. So when you don't have constructor, that time also compiler will create the default constructor, right? Now here also, when you create the object, by default compiler creates a default constructor, and when you create the parameterless constructor, it will override the default constructor. For example, here I gave values a equals to 10 and b equals to 20. Now what will happen? So default constructor is going to initialize the values with default values 0 and 0. Okay, so then when it will get the parameterless constructor, that time it is going to give the values 10 and 20. Let's see how this will work now. Default or parameterless constructor. Now let's initialize. Now when I try to create the object for that particular class, what will happen? So by default, okay, a is 0, b 0, name will be null, gender will be boolean false, date of birth will be 0101. All are set to default value because compiler already created a default constructor and it is going to initialize with the default values. Okay, now our parameterless constructor is going to override compiler's default constructor. Okay, now what will happen? We are going to override the values with 10 and 20, and when you try to access the method, it should give 10 plus 20, which will be 30 now. Previously 0 plus 0, because here we have overridden the values with 10 and 20. And 20. Okay, this is going to initialize the values 10 and 20. So 10 plus 20, it will give you the 30. Okay, this is called parameterless or default constructor. So now there is a disadvantage of this because it is not dynamic. Here we are giving the values. So how many objects you will create, a and b value will be same. Okay, we can't change dynamically. That is the disadvantage with default or parameterless constructor. Understood, guys? Now, how you will overcome this problem? With the help of parameterized constructor. So next, what is another type? Parameterized constructor. So how to create a parameterized constructor? Let's see now. So for example, here we have given the values like this: int a, b, which we did as hard coded. Instead of that, let's give the values like this: int x, int y. So this is dynamic. So now a value we are going to initialize with x, y value we are going to initialize with b value with y. Okay, so now see here. So when you create the object, it will show error here because there is no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter of x of addition int comma int. So give the integer value for the addition method for value x. Once you fix value x, then it will ask for value y. So both we have to give. So it will expect, while creating the object itself, it is expecting. So pass two values that should be integers. Okay, C# is a tightly coupled language which will follow the strongly typecasting. Okay, we have strong typecasting here, so that while it will compile time itself, it says it's pass the integer values. It recognizes during compilation time itself. It will ask you to pass the integer values. Now, how to pass? So let's take dynamically. Console.write line. Enter x value. So how you will read it? Int x equals convert dot to int32 of console dot read line. Next, y value, y equals to convert dot to int32 of console dot read line. So this is how we are passing x and y. So now let's see how this will work. Let's debug now. Function key, F10, enter x value, I'll give 10 here. Next, enter y value, I'll give 20 here. Okay, so now addition of x plus y. So what is the x value here? 10, and y value is 20. X is 10, y is 20. So that it is going to assign for a and b 10 and 20. So then it will call the addition method. So here we'll get the values like this, 10 plus 20, which will get like a 30 is the output. Understood, guys? So this is called parameterized constructor. And there is one more interview question. Is this can be overloadable? What is overloading? Method name must be same, right? Signature can be different. That might be number of arguments, order of arguments, or type of arguments. So in these three scenarios, we'll go for the overloading, right? Here also we can do constructor overloading. For example, we have C. We don't have C now. Suppose if you have a C, then we can have. Okay. So R with type change also you can give. We can do overload. Float Y. Okay. So but when you instantiate that time, so here you have to do the explicit type conversion because this is integer type and this is float type. That's why. So when you calling that particular method, you have to pass the values like this. So this is int, and if you want to pass values 10, 30f means this is float. So that time it will give the values like that. And if you want this constructor has to invoke, give the 3 arguments while creating the instance. That time it will go on call that particular constructor. Understood, guys? This is parameterized. We'll be having parameters. So that since it is a parameterized, it can be overloadable. Overload means method name must be same. See here, constructor name must be same, and only the signature. This is called signature. Parameters or arguments can be changed. Any doubts here, guys? Or anything you want me to repeat? Or anything you want me to give one more example? If you are not understanding also, let me know. I can explain from beginning again. So after class also, if you are not clear, you can ping me, you can ask me anytime. Okay, guys? Try to understand as much as possible. Okay. So this is C# is very, very crucial for our .NET development. Okay. So C# is never going to change. Technologies might change. Okay. So whatever you learn from today, after 10 years also, all these things will be there for sure. Okay. Only few new things are going to add, but these are all the common basic things. So whether you go for a Java or Python, whatever object-oriented programming language you go, these are all the basics. This will be there forever. Understood, guys? So next we have a private constructor. So what is private constructor? So we have seen default, parameterized, and what is private? For example, when you want to how to create a private constructor? By default, how will create constructor? Public constructor name. Now we want to give the private, since it is a private constructor. So while creating the private constructor, okay, so here it don't have any arguments. So why are you giving arguments? Don't give any arguments, since there is no arguments for this constructor. Okay, done. Next. So again error. So what is this? Addition is inaccessible due to its protection level. Means when you have a private constructor in a class, okay, when you have a private constructor in a class, we cannot create object for that particular private constructor. And so now let me try to do the inherit. So what is this? It is inaccessible due to its protection level. So we can do the inheritance as well. Understood, guys? So when you want to restrict the class, okay, we have seen sealed class yesterday. What is sealed class? It does not allow you to do the inheritance, but you can able to do the object creation. It supports. But here, either object creation or inheritance, both it is not supporting. So now, what is the purpose of having private constructor? Means when you don't want to do object creation and inheritance, that particular time will go for a private constructor. Okay. So when you create a private constructor, we can't. So first give private keyword or access modifier to constructor, and when you give the private constructor, it can't be instantiated, or instead of can't be, it doesn't allow you to, do the instantiation. And it doesn't allow you to do the inheritance. Okay. When you have a private constructor in class, it doesn't allow you to create the object, as well as it doesn't allow you to do the inheritance outside of the class. So only inside the class, within class. Okay. Addition, add equals new function dot add. Only within the class you can able to access that. Understood, guys? Okay. So here you give a equals to 10, b equals to 11. console.read key. Now, okay, so within the class you can do instantiate, right? So only within the class. Outside the class we cannot do the instantiation as well as inheritance. So that is called private constructor. When you create a private constructor, it does not allow you to create the instantiation outside of the class, as well as it does not allow you to do the inheritance. So for this class, you don't want to be a super class or parent class for any other class. That particular time we'll create a private constructor. Okay, and this is this should be your last class. Okay, so from this class there won't be any child classes. In that particular scenario, we can go for a private constructor. Understood, guys? Now, so next, what is static constructor? And finally, we'll talk about copy constructor. What is static constructor? So, when you create a static constructor, okay, the purpose of static constructor is to initialize the static members. We use private static constructor. When you have a static members, to initialize those, you'll use a static constructor. Okay, and this static constructor does not have any access modifier, because since it is a static, it will be accessed through class reference. That's why it does not allow any access modifier to give. And also, as yesterday we discussed, it is parameterless. So can't create more than one static constructor in a class. Okay, since it is a parameterless, suppose we have a parameter so that with overloading we can create more than one static constructor, but it is a parameterless, so that it does not allow you to create more than one static constructor. And static constructor will get call, will get invoke or call first time when you call the any class member automatically, guys. Okay, we cannot call manually. Okay, static constructor we can't call manually. When you access any property or method, anything inside your class, so that it will get invoked automatically. Okay, so for to create static constructor, we no need to use static class only. In non-static class also we can create static constructor when you have a static members. See, when you have a static members, that time to initialize those static members, we use static constructor. Understood, guys? Now, for example, I have a stat public static. Let's take employee static roll number. Okay, does not exist in the current context. Sorry, no data type. Okay, integer. Okay, so now this is my static member. Okay, so what I can do, I'll create one constructor here. Public employee roll number equals 1001. Now, I have a method here Static this is static constructor. When you have a static constructor, okay, so let's see here. Hundred 101, or let's take some other. Roll number plus plus equals to means roll number equals to roll number plus roll number. Okay, or let's do roll number equals to, each time it will become 100. Let's do plus only. Print roll number. Okay, so now guys, try to understand the concept here. Very important intro question. So just we have to concentrate it. Why the static constructor is useful here? So why we have to use in real time? I will see now. Okay, I have created one object here. So let me create one more object, one more object, one more object. A2, A3, A4. Okay, so now let's see how this will work. So now when I do the, let me print here. This is static constructor. Okay, without even not waiting for your class to instantiate. Before that only by default static constructor is getting invoked. Okay, so and the value here is roll number, which is 100. It is printing same thing, and it will do the increment, and now it will come to the instance. Okay, so it will create salary, which is 501. See guys, means if you see, when you create a static constructor, will get invoked only one time. Okay, when you access the class, okay, by default it will go to the static constructor. You no need to, you can't call. Practically speaking, we cannot call static constructor explicitly. Okay, so this constructor we can call. How it will call? When you create the object, that particular time it will go and hit. So how many objects it will create? Suppose if you create 100 objects, 100 times it will hit, which that is non-static constructor. Okay, that will be your public parameterized or parameterized whatever constructor you have. Okay, those many times it will get invoked, but static constructor will get invoked only one time. For example, something is constant. For example, roll number will be constant, right? It's not going to change for a particular student or particular employee ID. So that particular time will go for a static constructor. Understood, guys? When you want to initialize the static members, we'll go for a static constructor. For example, So this is one example. Let's keep here. And you create, suppose when you have a static class, suppose if you have a static class, non-static members it won't allow. Okay, all members should be static only. See this? If you see this, non-static constructor does not allow, only static constructor. To initialize the static constructor we use. So now how you access? You just employee dot roll number. Console back, right? You print something, or you just do so when you have a static constructor in a class, it does not allow any instance member to get invoked. Okay, only static members. So now to initialize the static members, we use static constructor, and static constructor roll number is 100 and salary is 500. Okay, static constructor can't be parameterized. We cannot give the parameters. If you give parameters, it will give the error. What is this? Static constructor must be parameterless. And for example, if you given something here, public static employee. So what is this? Access modifier not allowed for static constructor. Understood, guys? So this is how a static constructor will work. Next, copy constructor. So what is copy constructor here? Which will pass. Okay. So let me create a copy constructor here. So for example, if I have a class here, so what is copy constructor? When you pass a instance as a object, that is called copy constructor. So this is a normal constructor, public employee. This is our normal default or parameterless constructor, right? So when you give the instance as copy, when you pass a class object as an argument, this is called copy constructor. So what is copy constructor? When you pass class object as an argument, that is called copy constructor. So when you pass class object as reference, that we'll call it as a copy constructor. Okay. So now what is the purpose of copy constructor? This is to initialize the new instance for the existing instance. Okay. Now let's see how this will work. Let's see one example. So I have a class employee, and here I give, let's take some two arguments here. Public int emp id, public string name. Okay, I have two arguments here. So now when I pass the instance of the object as argument here, so let me print the value. For example, let's take like this: emp id equals emp dot emp id. Next, name equals to emp dot name. Now so how to create the object for this? Now, for example, I have another constructor here, parameterized public employee int number and string name. I have two arguments. empty id equals number. So empty id equals to number, name equals to name. Now and here right line empty id and name. Here also will print empty id and name. So now when you create the object, employee equals employee of, there are two constructors are there. One is copy constructor, another one is parameterized constructor. For example, let me give parameterized constructor some values. I'll give here 101 0. This is one instance. Second, so that time what will call? It will call the parameterized constructor, calling parameterized constructor. So second time I want to call the copy constructor. So this time you will pass instance employee 2 when you create the object. So this instance as argument. If you pass first class instance as argument, this is called copy constructor. So this time it will call copy constructor. Let's debug and see how this will work. So it will assign the value which will print same value. So then it will go to another method. So since it is a copy constructor, we passed the instance object as an argument, so that this is also will print same values. Understood, guys? So this is parameterless constructor and this is copy constructor. What is copy constructor? When you pass class object as an instance, that is called copy constructor. When you pass class object as an argument, that is called copy constructor. Okay. So what is the use of copy constructor? We can initialize the values with existing values, existing instance. Okay. So that is the advantage of copy constructor. In real time, we won't use copy constructor much, but parameterized, default, those two will be more, and static as well. Static constructor, default, and parameterized. These are the constructors we'll use in real time more.